Hello and welcome to screencast number 10. In this screencast we're going to look at oil and gas extraction and how it modifies the environment. We're also going to talk about paying. Who pays for all this to be done? And then we're going to take an extensive look into fossil fuel extraction having mixed consequences for local people. We may be able to get to dependence on foreign energy, but those are the concepts that we're going to be talking about in this screencast. So if we're drilling for conventional oil or gas on land, there's a lot more that we need to consider beside just the impact of drilling. There's road networks that must be constructed, and many sites need to be explored in the course of prospecting and where they're going to be mining. There needs to be an extensive infrastructure that will support a full-scale drilling operation, and that typically is going to include housing for workers, access roads, a way to transport the pipelines. Also, we're going to need waste piles for the removed soil. There's going to be ponds that will be constructed to collect the toxic sludge that remains after the useful components of oil have been removed. And all of these activities can pollute the soil, the air, and the water. They can fragment habitats, and they can disturb wildlife. So they have a big impact. And all of this impact has been documented on the tundra of Alaska's North Slope. And policymakers are still continuing to debate here whether they need to open the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to drilling. That's been a big debate going on for many years. The upside to all of this, drilling technology is now more environmentally sensitive than it was in the past. We've come up with a new technology called directional drilling, and this allows drillers to bore down vertically and then curve to drill horizontally. And what happens with this is extraction companies will follow the course of the horizontal layer deposits to extract the most they can from them, and it allows drilling to reach a large underground area, and meaning that they only need one drill pad rather than multiple drill pads. So this reduces our surface footprint, and drilling is actually smaller in this case. So who pays? Guess what? Taxpayers. You're paying. Your mom and dad are paying. And you're paying twice sometimes, if not more, for the cost of fossil fuels. The cost of alleviating the many health and environmental impacts of fossil fuel extraction and the use are generally not internalized in the market prices of the fossil fuels. So we're not going to see this in those market prices. But instead, we all pay these external costs through medical expenses and the cost of environmental cleanup, and the impacts on our quality of life. The prices we pay at the gas pumps or on our monthly utility bill do not even cover the financial cost of fossil fuel production. It doesn't come near the cost. Fossil fuel prices have been kept inexpensive as a result of government subsidies to extraction companies. The profitable and well-established fossil fuel industries still receive far more financial support from taxpayers than do the young and struggling renewable energy sources. So we all pay for our fossil fuel energy through our taxes, and we don't even realize it. We don't know that we're paying for it, and then we pay for it when we buy our gas. So, as you can imagine, there are mixed consequences for people that live near fossil fuel extraction. People living in the fossil fuel bearing regions must weigh the environmental, health, and social drawbacks of fossil fuel development against the financial benefits that they and their families may gain. In communities where fossil fuel extraction is taking place, generally they experience a flush of high-paying jobs and economic activity, and for many people these economic benefits far outweigh other concerns. But the economic boons are just temporary. Residents may be left with the legacy of the polluted environment for generations to come. So let's consider Fort McMurray, which is the hub of Alberta's oil sand boom. The population there has skyrocketed from 2,000 people in the 1960s to over 100,000 today. People are flocking there looking for jobs. Most of the residents are men, averaging the age of 32. And the city, believe it or not, boasts the highest birth rate in Canada. The salaries are high, but so are the rents and the home prices. If you're a well-disciplined worker, you can become wealthy, but others will fall behind because they will be victims of drug abuse, alcoholism, gambling, and like all boom towns, McMurray is outgrowing its infrastructure, and it's likely to experience a bust when the price of the principal resource falls. Along with considering Alberta, the Keystone XL pipeline extension that would carry the oil made by the sand oils would create what they call 20,000 job years. Now that's not jobs for 20,000 years, but what it would do is it would allow TransCanada to have about 6,500 construction jobs that would be available for 2 years or more, and then about 7,000 one-year jobs for manufacturers of the supplies. So you put those together and that's 20,000 job years that they're talking about. So it makes it look like there's more jobs available for a longer amount of time as well. They're just temporary. The pipeline project has mixed consequences. TransCanada had to negotiate with thousands of landowners along the Keystone XL route, offering them money for the right to install the pipeline on their land. Some were happy to accept payments, but landowners who declined Canada's offers found that their rights were taken away by a ruling called eminent domain. And this is a policy by which the court set aside private property, the rights to that private property, to make way for projects judged to be for the public good. So they can just come right in and they can take your land if they deem that it's necessary to take the land. So the U.S. Supreme Court in 2005 ruled that even private companies can usurp land rights like this. A landowner who is paid an amount determined by the court to be fair cannot appeal the decision. John Harder, who is from South Dakota and a rancher that lives along the pipeline route, said, "I found out that they have more rights to my property than I do. It makes me very angry when I paid for it and I take care of it." The oil industry, when we consider what's happening in Alaska, which has a unique situation, the oil industry pays the Alaskan government a portion of its revenues. Since 1970s, the state of Alaska has received over $65 billion in oil revenues. Alaska's state constitution requires that 1/4 of the state oil revenues be placed in a permanent fund, and this pays yearly dividends to all residents. Since 1982, Alaskan residents have received annual payouts ranging anywhere from $331 to $2,069. This distribution of revenue is unusual. Most parts of the world where fossil fuels are extracted, you're not going to see that happen. The local residents are going to suffer They're going to be exposed to pollution without any compensation. Even when you get multinational gas or oil corporations that come in and they pay the developing nations for access to extract the gas or the oil, the money does not generally go to the people but stays within the government. Oil-rich developing nations like Ecuador and Venezuela and Nigeria tend to have few environmental regulations, and the governments may not even enforce regulations if there's a risk of losing the large sums of money that are associated with the development. In Nigeria, I went a little bit too far ahead, sorry. In Nigeria, the Shell Oil Company extracted about $30 billion of oil from the Ogoni people, and yet the Ogoni people still live in poverty. They don't have running water, they don't have electricity, and the profits of this extraction went to the military dictatorship of Nigeria. The development resulted in oil spills, noise, and constantly burning gas flares. This caused illness among the people that lived nearby. In 1962, there was an Ogoni activist leader by the name of Ken Saro-Wiwa, and he worked for fair compensation to the Ogonis. Saro-Wiwa was arrested finally in 1994. He was given a trial that was universally regarded as a sham and then put to death by the military tribunal. The fossil fuel extraction comes to communities. People see that they are divided by the health and environmental impacts, but they see short economic benefits. So there's a big debate that occurs in North Dakota and parts of the West in response to oil and gas drilling, and in Pennsylvania and New York and other states above the Marcellus Shale, where petroleum industry is hydrofracking for gas. The debate has gone over for years in the Appalachian over the mountaintop removal of mining, and just basically there's no easy answers. But the impact would be lessened if extraction industries were to put more health and environmental safeguards in place for the workers and residents. They need to come up with regulation on this. One of the things that we are trying to do is reduce our dependency on foreign energy. And we might have to end this here, not at this point, but we might have to leave this off and start again in the next screencast. But all of our modern technologies and services depend in some way on fossil fuels. So to say that we are very vulnerable to the supplies becoming costly or unavailable, that is closer to the truth than you know. Germany, France, and South Korea and Japan consume far more energy than they produce, and they rely entirely on imports. Since its 1970 oil production peak, the United States has relied more on foreign energy, and today imports nearly half of its oil. Such reliance means that seller nations can control energy prices. They can force buyer nations to pay more as supplies dwindle. In 1973, and you might have heard of this, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, resolved to stop selling oil to the United States. The predominantly Arab nations of OPEC opposed U.S. support of the Israel and Arab and Israeli Yom Kippur War and sought to raise prices by restricting supply. The embargo created panic in the West and caused oil prices to skyrocket. This spurred inflation, and there were fear of oil shortages that drove American consumers to wait in long lines at gas pumps. A similar supply shock followed in 1979 in response to the Iranian Revolution. The majority of the world oil reserves are located in that politically volatile Middle East, and crises in this region are a constant concern for U.S. policymakers.